Washington arrives in Detroit with a championship game ahead of it, and Detroit arrives with 10 consecutive losses behind it. But for one half, the Lions make the standings look like a lie. Welcome back to NFL Chapters, where every game gets a story, whether it helps decide a championship or just give a desperate football team one final opportunity to avoid history. It's November 29th, 1942. The Washington Redskins are visiting the Detroit Lions at Briggs Stadium. Washington's 9-1, Detroit is 0-10. The Redskins already secured its place on top of the Eastern Division. The Lions are trying to prevent the first winless season in franchise history. On paper, this shouldn't be close. But for 30 minutes, it is. And the NFL calls this week 12. But every team plays only 11 games in 1942. This is the regular season finale for Washington and Detroit. Washington's already completed the difficult part of its schedule. After losing 14-7 to the New York Giants earlier in the season, the Redskins have won 8 consecutive games. They've beaten the Giants in the rematch, swept Philadelphia, and handled Brooklyn twice. They're 9-1, and they're going back to the NFL championship game. Detroit spent the same autumn moving in the opposite direction. The Lions have played 10 games, and they've lost all 10. They've only scored 35 points, meaning Washington has scored more than 6 times as many points during the season. Detroit's already changed coaches, too. Bill Edwards began the year and went 0-3. Bill Carcass took over, and he didn't find a victory either. There's no draft position incentive waiting for the Lions. There's no benefit to losing. No theory about protecting the future. No trust in the system. They just have one more Sunday to avoid 0-11. Would that be enough motivation to threaten the best team in the Eastern Division? For a while, yeah. The Redskins are coached by Ray Flaherty, who already led Washington to 2 NFL championship games. His team's built around Sammy Baugh, although saying that almost understates Baugh's importance. Baugh isn't just Washington's quarterback. He's also one of its defensive backs, and he handles most of the punting. In an era before specialization, Baugh can affect a game almost every time the ball is snapped. He's completing nearly 59% of his passes in 1942, and that's pretty remarkable for that period. He'll finish the regular season with 1,524 yards, 16 touchdown passes. Detroit's entire team will throw 1. Washington also has Andy Farkas, hard-running fullback from University of Detroit. Farkas wears eye paint during games, years before it becomes standard. He runs with his knees high and his shoulders forward, and he's dangerous catching the ball out of the backfield. Wilbur Moore gives Washington another receiving threat. Bob Seymour helps carry the rushing load. Dick Poyan can run, pass, punt, and kick. It's not an unbeatable team. The Giants already demonstrated that. It is, however, a complete team. Washington can win through Baugh's arm, through its defense, or field position. And somewhere beyond Detroit, the Chicago Bears are waiting. And they're 11-0. The Bears. They're attempting to complete the perfect season and win their 3rd straight NFL championship. They're also the team that humiliated Washington 73-0 in the 1940 title game. So yeah, Washington already clinched the division. But this isn't a meaningless finale. The Redskins are 2 weeks away from another meeting with the best team in football, and nobody wants to enter that game after losing to an 0-10 opponent. Detroit's season has been even worse than the record would suggest. They finished with 38 points in 11 games. Their offense turns the ball over 56 times. Detroit's passers combined for 33 interceptions and 1 touchdown. Harry Hopp, 13 interceptions. Chet Wetterland, 10. Tom Colletta, who receives much of the work against Washington, enters the finale without a touchdown pass. Their offense doesn't just struggle to score. It frequently gives the opposition another chance. Still, there are professional football players on the Detroit sideline. Men who spent the season being hit, criticized, and defeated without receiving the modern consolation of a high draft pick or a rebuilt roster. They're not playing to improve their postseason position. They're playing because this is the last game. They're professionals. Washington standing across from them, and 0-11 will follow them forever. And only 6,044 people show up to Briggs Stadium. It's a tiny crowd inside a large baseball park. Washington has recently played before crowds of more than 30,000. Now the Redskins run onto a field surrounded by mostly empty seats, facing an opponent that hasn't won since the previous season. It'd be understandable if Washington's attention wandered towards Chicago. It would also be dangerous. Detroit receives the first meaningful opportunity. Washington's offense doesn't immediately take control. Ball throws a pick, one of 3 Redskin turnovers during the afternoon. The Lions are able to play much of the opening quarter without being overwhelmed. Detroit moves close enough for a field goal attempt. Ted Pavelec is primarily an offensive lineman. He attempts only 2 field goals during the entire 1942 season. From 25 yards away, Pavelec kicks this one through, and Detroit leads Washington 3-0. Already that's a little bit unusual. The Lions haven't held many leads this season, and they're certainly not expected to hold one against the Eastern Division champs. But Washington doesn't answer in the first quarter, and it doesn't answer in the second quarter either. Bob moves the Redskins more effectively than Detroit moves it, but Washington wastes opportunities. Poyon attempts 3 passes, completes none. Both teams turn the ball over, drives disappear before reaching the end zone. The Lions carry their 3-0 lead into halftime. An 0-10 team has just shut out a 9-1 team for 30 minutes. And how nervous would you be if you're a Washington fan listening to this game on the radio? The Redskins aren't in danger of losing the division. They're in danger of dragging a humiliating performance directly into a championship game against an undefeated opponent. Detroit, meanwhile, they're 1 half away from transforming its entire season. The 10 losses won't disappear, but one victory over Washington would change the way the year's remembered. You can almost feel the story beginning to lean toward Detroit's one clean afternoon, but it doesn't clean quite far enough. Washington comes out at halftime and begins playing like the Redskins. Ball starts finding space in Detroit's secondary. The Redskins move the ball deep into Lions territory, and from the 11, ball looks for Andy Farkas. Farkas gets open, ball delivers. Touchdown, Washington. The extra point fails, so the Redskins lead by 6-3. Detroit is still 1 field goal away from tying the game. The Lions have spent more than half the afternoon hanging around, and Washington hasn't created the separation that anyone expected. Then the game's decisive play comes from neither Baugh nor Farkas. Detroit's forced to punt from deep in its own territory. Washington tackle, Willie Wilkin, breaks through the protection and blocks the kick. The loose ball travels through the back of the end zone. Safety. Washington gets 2 points and pushes the lead to 8-3. It's not a spectacular margin, but the nature of the game has changed. Detroit now needs a touchdown. That's a serious problem for an offense that has thrown 1 touchdown pass all year. Washington has finally forced Detroit outside the narrow path that the Lions would need to follow. They can no longer win with a field goal, or defense, or field position. They have to produce something their offense almost never produces: a trip to the end zone. While Washington and Detroit play inside Briggs Stadium, another change is occurring across the U.S. Coffee rationing officially begins on this exact date, November 29th, 1942. Coffee sales had been suspended for a week beforehand to discourage hoarding. Beginning Sunday, Americans are limited through the federal rationing system. So imagine attending this game. You wake up on the first morning of coffee rationing, travel to a mostly empty baseball stadium, and watch an 0-10 football team lead the Eastern Division champions at halftime. Meanwhile, the Second World War is reshaping almost everything around the sport. Players have entered military service, rosters are thinning, travel and resources are becoming harder to manage. By the following season, the league will begin merging teams because some franchises can't find enough players. But on this Sunday, the NFL marches bravely forward. 6,000 people gather in Detroit, perhaps looking for a few hours when the scoreboard matters more than the war. The game is small compared with what's happening in the outside world. Doesn't make it meaningless. Detroit still trails by only 5 points when the fourth quarter starts. The Lions' defense, they've done almost everything that could reasonably be asked. Washington has the better roster, the better quarterback, but Detroit has forced turnovers and kept the game within reach. The Lions' offense just can't finish the job. Washington gets the ball back, and Ball directs another scoring drive. This time, he finds end-to-end ciphers from 13 yards away. Touchdown. Poyon makes the extra point. Washington leads 15-3. That's the final score. Ball completes 14 of 19 passes for 128 yards. He throws 2 scores, 1 interception. Those numbers don't appear enormous by today's standards, but this is 1942. Washington's entire passing game runs through Ball. After a difficult first half, he completes nearly 3/4 of his passes. Farkas finishes with 48 rushing yards and catches the first touchdown. Cyphers catches the second. Poyon carries the ball 18 times, but gains only 41 yards. Washington never truly dominates on the ground. It commits 3 turnovers, misses an extra point, and goes scoreless for the entire first half. So the Redskins didn't overwhelm Detroit. They survived. Washington wins 15-3, ending their regular season at 10-1. Detroit falls to 0-11. A 12-point win over a winless team usually disappears from memory. It becomes one line of the standings. Washington won, Detroit lost. Everybody moves on. But the shape of the game matters. Detroit led for more than half the afternoon. Its defense intercepted Baugh and kept Washington out of the end zone until the third quarter. For a team enduring one of the worst offensive seasons in the history of the NFL, it's not nothing. The Lions weren't talented enough to finish the upset, but they didn't quit on the season. They didn't watch Washington's record, decide the result was inevitable, and leave the field early. Washington deserves credit too. The Redskins could have panicked. They could have begun forcing passes after going scoreless through the first half. Instead, they trusted Baugh, found Farkas, and let a special teams play change the game. Good teams aren't always good for 60 minutes. Sometimes they're just calm enough for the game to come back to them. 2 weeks later, Washington hosts the undefeated Chicago Bears at Griffith Stadium. The Bears are attempting to complete a perfect season. They're also seeking a 3rd consecutive championship. Chicago scores first when Lee Arto returns a fumble 50 yards for a touchdown. Extra point is missed. Then Baugh answers. He finds Wilbur Moore for a 38-yard touchdown. Washington converts and leads 7-6 at halftime. Farkas scores from 1 yard out in the third quarter, and this time, Washington's defense makes the lead stand up. The Redskins defeat the 11-0 Bears 14-6 and win the NFL championship. 2 years after losing 73-0 to Chicago, Washington completes one of the greatest revenge stories in NFL history, and that championship run includes this strange afternoon in Detroit, when Washington trailed an 0-10 team at halftime, then needed a blocked punt to take control. Detroit's story takes longer to repair. They finish 0-11 with 38 points scored and 263 allowed. They rank last in the league in both categories, by a wide margin. They improved to 3-6-1 in 1943, then reached 6-3-1 in 1944. Their climb back towards relevance is slow, but 1942 remains the bottom. Washington returns to the Eastern Division Championship in 1943. The Redskins continue building around Baugh and come within one playoff victory of returning to the championship game. But they never repeat the exact path of 1942. Lose early, win 9 straight, survive Detroit, shock Chicago. That path belongs to the 1942 team. So what was Redskins Lions 1942? It's not an upset. It's not a shootout. It's not even the most important Redskins game played that month. It's a warning. Records can tell you who should win. They can't guarantee when that team will begin playing like the favorite. Detroit enters with nothing left except one afternoon and the chance to make Washington uncomfortable. For 30 minutes, that's exactly what they do. Then Sammy Ball finds Andy Farkas. Willie Wilkin breaks through the punt protection. Ed Cyphers finishes the scoring. Washington leads Detroit at 10-1 and begins preparing for Chicago. Detroit leaves at 0-11, having come closer than the final score could ever explain. So I know this is an obvious question with an obvious answer, but would you rather have Washington's championship season? Would you rather have been inside that Detroit locker room at halftime when the worst team in football was 30 minutes from beating one of the best? Washington had somewhere to go. Detroit had nowhere left to go. But for one half, they met in the middle. Thanks for sticking around.